The fluorescent lights hummed like distant thunder over the cracked linoleum floor of the Rusty Spur diner, casting long shadows across the booths where locals nursed their coffees and plates of greasy hash browns. The air was thick with the scent of sizzling bacon and stale cigarette smoke that clung to the yellowed walls, a relic from days when the no-smoking signs were just suggestions. Outside, the late afternoon sun dipped low over the dusty plains of Willow Creek, painting the parked pickups in hues of rust and gold. It was the kind of small-town spot where secrets simmered quietly until they boiled over. In the corner booth, 16-year-old Connor Doyle slouched with his hoodie pulled low, picking at the edges of a cold French fry. His grandmother, Margaret Doyle, sat across from him, her wrinkled hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea. At 72, Margaret carried the weight of years in her sharp blue eyes, eyes that had seen too many departures and too few returns. Connor's questions hung between them like unspoken accusations. Why his mother had vanished when he was just a toddler. Why his father was nothing more than a faded photograph tucked in a drawer. Today, those questions felt heavier, stirred by the old Polaroid Margaret had pulled out that morning, showing a younger woman laughing beside a man on a roaring motorcycle. The diner's bell jingled sharply as the door swung open, letting in a gust of hot wind and the low rumble of engines idling outside. Heads turned instinctively. A group of bikers rolled in, their leather vests patched with the emblem of Iron Promise, a stylized iron fist clutching a broken chain, symbolizing bonds forged in fire. They were a sight in Willow Creek. Weathered men and women who lived by the road's unforgiving code, their Harleys lined up like sentinels in the gravel lot. Leading them was Samuel Northwind Reed, 54, and built like the oak trees that bent but never broke in prairie storms. His silver-streaked beard framed a face etched with lines from sun and sorrow, and his eyes, a piercing grey, scanned the room with the quiet vigilance of someone who'd outrun more than just miles. Samuel slid into a stool at the counter, the leather of his gloves creaking as he ordered black coffee. His crew fanned out, claiming a row of seats, their presence filling the space with the faint tang of motor oil and worn denim. The diner, usually buzzing with small talk, fell into a wary hush. These weren't the weekend posers. Iron Promise was legend in these parts. Veterans who'd traded battlefields for back roads, honoring promises that others forgot. Margaret's gaze locked onto Samuel the moment he entered. Her mug trembled in her grip, tea sloshing over the rim. Connor noticed, glancing up. "Gran, you okay?" She didn't answer. Instead, her voice cut through the quiet like a knife, steady and unyielding. "Connor, look there, at that man by the counter. That's your real father." The words landed like a thunderclap. The entire diner froze. Forks hovered mid-air. Conversations died in mid-sentence. The waitress, mid-pour, let the coffee pot clatter against a cup. Samuel's head snapped up, his coffee untouched, as if the steam rising from it carried the echo of a ghost. Connor's face drained of colour, his fry forgotten as he stared at the stranger, the biker with the familiar jawline from that old photo, the one his mother had whispered about in bedtime stories before she was gone. Margaret's eyes never left Samuel's. "You promised her you'd come back, Sam Reed, after that long haul to the coast. You swore on the iron of your bike, on the promise that bound you both." Samuel rose slowly, his stool scraping against the floor with a sound that echoed in the silence. The weight of decades pressed on him. The accident on a rain-slicked highway 20 years back, the coma that stole months, the hospital discharge with no word from the woman he'd loved, Elena Doyle. They'd met at a roadside rally, her fire matching his wanderlust. A whirlwind romance, a promise exchanged under the stars. He'd ride out for one big job, secure their future, and return to build a life. But the crash had shattered everything. When he woke, the world had moved on, or so he'd thought. Letters undelivered, a forwarding address that led nowhere. He'd buried the pain under miles of blacktop, leading iron promise through storms and skirmishes, always chasing redemption in the roar of engines. Now, here was Margaret, Elena's mother, her face a map of unresolved grief. And the boy, tall, lanky, with Elena's green eyes, staring at him like he'd seen a spectre. Samuel's crew shifted uneasily behind him, hands resting near hidden holsters, but he waved them down. This wasn't a fight for fists or fury, it was a reckoning of the heart. Connor shoved back from the booth, his chair toppling with a crash that shattered the tension. "What the hell, Gran? This some kind of joke?" His voice cracked, anger masking the storm inside. He'd grown up piecing together fragments, a mother lost to illness, a father who couldn't stay. But this? A biker daddy materializing like a bad dream? Margaret reached for him, her voice soft but ironclad. "No joke, boy. Your ma never stopped waiting. She told me everything before. Before she couldn't anymore. He was out there, hurt bad, thinking we'd left him behind. But blood don't lie, and neither does a promise." Samuel took a step forward, the floorboards creaking under his boots. The scent of his leather vest mingled with the diner's grease, grounding the moment in raw reality. "Margaret," he said, his voice gravelly from disuse on personal matters. "Elena, she's gone." The question hung, a wound reopening. She nodded, tears carving paths down her cheeks. "Cancer took her 5 years back, but she made me swear, if I ever saw you, I'd set it right, for Connor." The boy backed against the wall, heart pounding like the engines outside. Questions flooded him. Why now? Why here? The diner felt smaller, the air thicker, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Samuel's eyes met Connor's, a flicker of recognition passing between them. Lost sons, both adrift in their ways. Outside, the sun sank lower, casting bloody streaks across the horizon. Iron Promise's bikes gleamed like promises waiting to be kept. Samuel knew this revelation could shatter lives or mend them, but one thing was certain. The road ahead would test every oath he'd ever made. In that frozen moment, with the whole diner watching, a fragile bridge began to form, one built on truth, not blood, and strong enough to carry them forward. If you'd like to dive deeper into this tale of rediscovered promises and the family we choose, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support keeps these stories rolling like thunder across the plains. Word count 872. The diner's silence stretched like a taut wire, vibrating with the unspoken weight of revelations long buried. Samuel stood midway between the counter and the booth, his broad frame casting a shadow that swallowed the faded checkered pattern on the floor. The air hung heavy, laced with the bitter edge of cooling coffee and the faint metallic tang from the biker's gear. Outside, the rumble of a distant truck on the highway pierced the tension, a reminder that the world kept moving even when hearts stood still. Connor's back pressed against the wall, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of a nearby table, eyes darting between his grandmother and the stranger who suddenly claimed a piece of his bloodline. Samuel's gaze softened as it settled on the boy, tracing the familiar curve of Elena's cheekbones in Connor's face, the same defiant tilt to the chin that had drawn him to her all those years ago. "Kid," he said, his voice low and rough, like gravel under tires, "I didn't know about you, about any of this." He took another step, boots thudding softly, careful not to crowd the space. The Iron Promise crew remained seated, their postures alert but restrained, a silent wall of loyalty at his back. Jax, the wiry veteran with a scar across his knuckles from a forgotten skirmish, exchanged a glance with Lena, the only woman in their core group. Her tattooed arms crossed as she watched the scene unfold. Margaret wiped her eyes with the hem of her apron, the fabric worn thin from years of diner shifts. Elena named him after her grandfather, Connor James, said he'd have your strength, Sam, the kind that doesn't break. Her words carried the quiet authority of someone who'd guarded secrets like fragile heirlooms. She slid the old Polaroid across the table toward Connor, the photo's edges curled from time. In it, Elena beamed beside a younger Samuel, his arm around her waist, the motorcycle's chrome gleaming under a desert sun. Connor snatched it up, his fingers trembling as he studied the image, then flicked his eyes back to the man before him. The resemblance hit like a punch. The same broad shoulders, the same quiet intensity. "Why should I believe this?" Connor's voice cracked, laced with the raw edge of betrayal. He'd spent years resenting the ghost of a father, piecing together stories from Margaret's hesitant tales and the empty space at school events. Now this biker, reeking of the open road, with a life that screamed freedom over family, stood there like he'd just ridden in from a myth. "You left. Mom died thinking you were gone for good, and now you waltz in here with your gang." The accusation stung, visible in the way Samuel's jaw tightened, a muscle flickering under the salt and pepper stubble. He pulled out a stool from an empty table and sat, leveling with the boy at eye height. "I didn't leave by choice, son. That haul I took, it was supposed to be the last one. Secure enough to start fresh with Elena. But the road turned on me. Black ice on a curve outside Reno. Woke up in a hospital with tubes in my arms and no word from her. Doc said weeks in a coma, months to heal. By the time I could ride again, the address she'd given led to an empty lot. Thought she'd moved on, found someone steady, buried it deep and kept riding with the promise. We help folks who can't help themselves, lost causes, broken oaths. Never figured I'd be the one needing salvage." Connor slid down the wall to sit on the floor, the Polaroid clutched in his fist. The diner's patrons began to stir, whispers rippling like wind through dry grass. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Rita with a name tag pinned crookedly, hovered nearby, her tray balanced like a shield. "Everything all right here, folks?" she murmured, but her eyes betrayed curiosity, the small-town grapevine already churning. Margaret leaned forward, her voice a bridge between past and present. "Elena's letters came back undelivered too, Sam. She waited through the pain, through the treatments, told me about the baby right before. Well, before the end. Made me promise to find you if I could. Connor's been asking questions, getting into scraps at school. Needs to know where he comes from." Samuel nodded slowly, the weight of it settling like dust after a storm. Iron Promise wasn't just a club. It was a covenant, forged in the fires of war and wanderlust. He'd pulled his crew together after his own discharge, men and women scarred by battles abroad, binding them with the iron vow: honor the forgotten, protect the vulnerable. Now, this boy, his boy, stared at him with Eleanor's eyes, demanding proof beyond words. "I can't undo the years," Samuel admitted. "But if you're willing, I'll prove it. Blood tests, stories, whatever it takes. Iron Promise has ways. Docs we trust, off the grid. No one's rushing you." From the counter, Jax cleared his throat, his voice a low drawl. "Boss, we got eyes on the lot. Couple of locals sniffing around your bike. That sleazy realtor type from town, Harlan something. Heard him muttering about opportunities when word spreads. Harlan Tate was Willow Creek's self-appointed kingpin, a man who preyed on family dramas for land deals and leverage, whispering to authorities about unstable elements, like bikers, to scare folks into selling. The crew had crossed paths with his kind before, corruption wrapped in a suit, eroding the moral ground beneath honest lives. Samuel's eyes hardened, a protective instinct flaring. He couldn't let opportunists like Harlan twist this fragile reunion into a weapon. "Keep 'em at bay," he told Jax quietly. "This stays between us for now." Turning back to Connor, he extended a gloved hand, not to grab, but to offer. "Your call, kid. Walk away or step up. Either way, I'm here." Connor hesitated, the photo crumpling slightly in his grip. The scent of his grandmother's tea mingled with the biker's leather, a sensory tether pulling him toward the unknown. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, stars pricking the twilight sky like distant promises. In that moment, the diner transformed from a pit stop into a crossroads, where old oaths reignited and new ones waited to be forged. Connor's hand rose, inching toward Samuel's, the first thread in a tapestry of chosen family weaving itself against the gathering dark. The weight of eyes from the crew and the room pressed in, but for the first time, Connor felt seen, not as the troubled kid from the wrong side of town, but as part of something unbreakable. Iron Promise shifted subtly, their presence a shield against the shadows creeping in. Harlan's shadow loomed larger in the lot, his phone already dialing connections that could unravel everything, but Samuel's vow held firm: protect what mattered, no matter the cost. As Connor's fingers brushed leather, a spark jumped, the quiet ignition of trust, fragile yet fierce. The road ahead twisted with tests of loyalty and buried truths, but in the heart of the rusty spur, redemption began its slow, inexorable roll. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The twilight deepened outside the rusty spur, turning the gravel lot into a mosaic of shadows where Iron Promise's Harleys stood like silent guardians, their chrome edges catching the last glimmers of fading light. Inside, the diner's hum resumed in fits and starts, clinking silverware. A muffled cough from the back, but the air around the corner booth crackled with fragile possibility. Connor's fingertips lingered against the rough leather of Samuel's glove, a tentative bridge spanning the chasm of lost years. The contact was brief, electric, pulling back as if burned, yet it lingered in the space between them, unspoken but binding. Samuel didn't push. He withdrew his hand slowly, respecting the boy's guarded stance, and nodded toward the empty stool across from Margaret. "Sit, if you want. Or don't. But hear me out. Elena's laugh, the way she'd hum old road songs while fixing my bike chain. That's in you, kid. I see it." His words wove through the tension like smoke from a dying fire, evoking memories he'd carried alone across endless highways. The crew at the counter eased back, Jax nursing a soda while Lena scanned the room, her sharp eyes noting every patron's subtle shift, the way Rita the waitress lingered too long refilling mugs, or how old Mr. Hargrove in the far booth pretended to read his paper but strained to listen. Connor slumped into the stool anyway, the wood creaking under his weight, his hoodie sleeve brushing the table's scarred surface. The Polaroid lay between them like evidence in a trial, Elena's smile frozen in time. "She never talked much about you," he admitted, voice low, edged with the ache of half-truths. "Just that you were out there chasing horizons. Gran filled in bits, said you were a vet like the ones who come through town with stories too heavy to unpack. But school counselors? They pegged me as the angry kid from a broken home. Fights, suspensions, felt like I was fighting ghosts." Margaret's hand found Connor's shoulder, a steady anchor amid the swirl. "You've got fire, boy, just like her. But fire needs direction, not a cage." Her gaze flicked to Samuel, a silent plea laced with forgiveness. The diner's clock ticked onward, its hands marking seconds that felt like eternities, the scent of fresh pie wafting from the kitchen, a small comfort against the unraveling storm. Samuel leaned in, elbows on the table, the faint scent of wind and worn leather enveloping the booth. Iron Promise started as a way to keep oaths after the service. We were scattered souls, me from the sands overseas, Jax from the same unit, Lena pulling us from the wreckage of bad choices. We vow to stand for the overlooked, vets down on luck, families hit by floods or worse. No glory, just the grind of getting it right. He paused, eyes tracing the boy's tense posture. "That haul I mentioned, it was for a contact who owed Elena's family, quiet work to clear debts from her pa's passing. Thought it'd buy us a plot of land, roots. The crash, Left me piecing myself back, no calls getting through. When I healed, the world's wires were crossed. Assumed she'd cut ties. Connor's fingers drummed the table, a restless rhythm echoing the idling engines outside. And now? You just show up and I'm supposed to what? Ride off into the sunset with your biker family? Sarcasm masked the pull he felt, the curiosity warring with resentment, but beneath it a spark ignited, the chance to fill the void, to claim a legacy beyond whispers. Before Samuel could respond, the diner's bell jingled again, sharper this time, admitting a figure who slithered in like oil on water. Harlan Tate, Willow Creek's slick opportunist, entered with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mid-40s, paunchy in a too-tight suit, he carried the cologne of cheap ambition and the faint whiff of cigar smoke. He'd been circling the lot earlier, phone in hand, murmashing to unseen allies about fresh leverage in the Doyle name. Margaret's modest home sat on the edge of prime development land, the kind Harlan coveted for his shadowy expansions, strip malls and spec homes that swallowed small-town souls. "Evening, folks," Harlan drawled, sauntering toward the counter with feigned casualness, but his gaze zeroed on the booth like a hawk spotting prey. "Heard there's some family reunion brewing. Margaret, you old fox, always knew you had stories tucked away." He nodded at Samuel, the gesture laced with disdain. "And you? North wind, right? Word travels fast in these parts. Bikers stirring pots? Authorities might want to chat about that." The room tensed anew, whispers dying as Iron Promise's crew straightened. Jax's hand drifted to his belt, casual but ready, while Lena's stare could curdle milk. Samuel met Harlan's eyes evenly, his voice a low rumble. "This is Private Tate. Road's open. Keep walking it." No threat, just the unyielding calm of a man who'd faced worse than small-time sharks. Harlan chuckled, oily and unperturbed, sliding onto a stool nearby. "Private? In Willow Creek? Boy, here's a minor, and if there's questions about parentage, social services gets involved. I've got friends in county could smooth things for a favor. That Doyle plot out by the creek. Prime for progress. Sell now. Avoid the hassle." His words dripped with the poison of exploitation, preying on vulnerability like he'd done to widows and runaways before. Iron Promise had heard tales, families pressured into deals, lands lost to greed masked as aid. Connor's fists clenched, the booth feeling like a trap closing in. "Back off, man. This ain't your business." But doubt flickered. Harlan's reach was long, his whispers to officials a web that ensnared the unwary. Margaret's face paled, her grip tightening on Connor's shoulder. She'd fended off such vultures since Elena's passing, but alone. Samuel rose, his shadow falling over Harlan like a gathering cloud. "Iron Promise doesn't bend to snakes. We've got pull, docs for tests, lawyers who fight clean. Touch this family, and you'll find the road gets bumpy." The words carried the weight of their covenant, a shield forged in loyalty. Jax and Lena flanked him subtly, their presence a deterrent without a single move. Harlan's smile faltered, eyes darting to the lot where more locals gathered, drawn by rumor. He tossed a bill on the counter and backed toward the door. "Your funeral, Reed, but blood tests, promises, won't stop the tide." The bell jingled his exit, but the threat lingered, a shadow slinking into the night. Connor exhaled, the booth's confines easing as Samuel sat again. "That's the world out there. Folks like him twist truths for gain, but we choose our stands." He glanced at Margaret, then Connor. "If you'll have it, I'll ride with you to the clinic tomorrow. No strings, just answers." The boy nodded, slow and resolute, the Polaroid now tucked into his pocket like a talisman. Outside, engines revved softly as the crew prepared to roll, a convoy against the encroaching dark. Stars wheeled overhead, witnesses to oaths renewed. Yet Harlan's parting words echoed, hinting at deeper currents, corrupt threads pulling at the fragile weave of their reunion. In the quiet that followed, Connor felt the first stirrings of belonging, a promise taking root amid the ruins of doubt. The road to trust twisted ahead, shadowed by those who profited from fracture, but iron promises iron held firm, ready to forge what came next. The first light of dawn crept over Willow Creek like a hesitant promise, painting the rusty spur's windows in soft amber hues and chasing away the night's lingering chill. Samuel's Harley idled in the lot, its engine a low growl that vibrated through the gravel, mingling with the scent of dew-kissed earth and cooling metal. Connor stood beside it, backpack slung over one shoulder, the Polaroid safely tucked inside like a fragile compass. Margaret had insisted on coming, her resolve as unyielding as the diner's ancient coffee urn, though worry etched deeper lines into her face. Iron Promise's convoy formed a loose perimeter, Jax on his customized chopper, Lena scouting the road ahead, their vests catching the rising sun, symbols of unbreakable chains. Samuel handed Connor a spare helmet, the leather interior still warm from his own ride. Clinic's a 2-hour haul, neutral ground. Doc Harlan, no relation to that snake, owes us from a flood rescue last spring. He'll keep it quiet. His voice carried the steady cadence of someone who'd mapped countless routes, each mile a lesson in endurance. Connor hesitated, the helmet heavy in his hands, then strapped it on, the click echoing his internal shift. For the first time, the open road didn't feel like escape, it felt like direction. They rolled out in formation, the thunder of engines drowning the small town's early stirrings. Willow Creek blurred past, faded billboards for feed stores, fields whispering in the breeze, but Connor's mind raced ahead. Fragments of the night replayed, Harlan's oily retreat, the crew's subtle vigilance, Samuel's quiet recounting of Elena's favorite routes under starlit skies. Questions burned. What if the test proved nothing? What if it proved everything, upending the life he'd scraped together? The wind whipped at his jacket, carrying the faint aroma of pine from distant hills, a sensory reminder that some paths led to clarity, others to storms. Halfway there, Lena signaled a pull-off at a roadside overlook, her bike veering sharp against the guardrail. The convoy halted, dust swirling in lazy eddies. "Trouble brewing," she said, pulling off her sunglasses, her eyes scanning the horizon, where a black sedan trailed at a distance. County plates, Harlan's doing, called in favors to tail us, probably spinning yarns about endangering a minor to stir up child services. Her tone was matter-of-fact, honed from years of navigating grey zones where authority bent to influence. Samuel dismounted, his boots crunching on loose stones as he peered back. The sedan hung back, a predatory shadow against the rising sun. "Let 'em follow. We've got nothing to hide, but they won't get close." He turned to Connor, who gripped the handlebars of his borrowed ride, a sleek Iron Promise loaner, with white-knuckled focus. "This is what opportunists do, poke at wounds to claim the spoils, your grand's land. It's leverage for Harlan's empire. But Iron Promise? We shield the line." Margaret, riding pillion behind Jax, clutched her scarf against the wind's bite. That man's been circling since Elena passed, whispering about better offers when bills piled up. "Connor's all I got left. Won't let him fracture us now." Her words wove through the morning air, laced with the quiet ferocity of a guardian who'd outlasted grief. The clinic loomed on the outskirts of a nameless town, a squat building with peeling paint and a sign reading Willow Medical Center in faded letters. No frills, just the kind of place where truths emerged without fanfare. Doc Harlan, tall, bespectacled, with hands steady from stitching wounds in back-alley mercy runs, greeted them at the door, his nod to Samuel, a silent acknowledgement of debts repaid. Inside, the air hummed with the sterile scent of antiseptic and fresh linens, fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead. Connor sat on the exam table, rolling up his sleeve as the needle pricked his vein, the draw of blood a stark ritual under the room's harsh glow. "Results in a day, maybe 2, the doc murmured, labeling the vial with care. "Paternity's clear-cut these days, no room for doubt." But as they waited in the adjacent lounge, tension coiled like a spring. The sedan's occupants, 2 county deputies in crisp uniforms, lingered outside, one jotting notes on a clipboard while the other radioed in. Harlan's web tightened, his voice no doubt painting Samuel as a transient threat, the boy as a pawn in a custody play. Jax paced the hallway, his scarred knuckles flexing. "Heard from our network. Harlan's pushing for an emergency hold on Connor, claiming instability. Ties to some moral safeguard act. He twists for his gain. We've seen it. Separate families. Scoop up assets." Lena nodded, her fingers tapping a rhythm on her knee, already dialing a trusted contact. A retired judge who'd ridden with them once, now pulling strings from a quiet office. Samuel knelt before Connor, eye level in the worn vinyl chair, the lounger's clock ticking like a heartbeat. "This test, it's paper. Real proofs in actions. Eleanor taught me that. Her promise to wait, mine to return. I failed once, not by choice, but the road forgives if you steer true." His grey eyes held the boys, mirroring the storm within. Fear of rejection, hunger for roots. Connor swallowed hard, the vulnerability raw. "What if I'm not enough for this? For you?" The words hung, a confession in the quiet space. Margaret reached across, her hand bridging theirs. "Your Doyle and Reed blood, enough to weather any gale." Outside, engines revved as iron promise formed a barrier, their presence a deterrent etched in leather and loyalty. The deputies approached the door, badges glinting, but Jax met them with a calm wall of words. Permits in order, no cause for alarm, the club's charter as clean as prairie air. Tension peaked as the lead deputy knocked, his voice muffled through the glass. "Need to speak with the minor. Reports of potential neglect." Samuel rose, shielding the group, his frame a sentinel. "He's safe. Family business. Take it up with the doc." The standoff stretched, seconds feeling like miles, until Lena's phone buzzed, a counter from their ally, stalling the order with procedural red tape. The deputies retreated, the sedan peeling away with frustrated tires, but the encounter left echoes. Harlan's reach was insidious, preying on fragile moments to erode trust. Back on the bikes, the convoy pushed toward Willow Creek, the midday sun beating down like judgment. Connor rode closer to Samuel now, the wind carrying a tentative ease. The clinic's vial held answers, but the real forging happened here, in the shield of chosen kin against corruption's tide. Harlan's shadow loomed larger, his next move a whisper in official ears, but Iron Promise's vow burned brighter. Protect the promise, honor the blood, redeem the lost. As horizons unfolded, Connor felt the pull of legacy, a quiet strength rising amid the roar. The road twisted with ethical snares, but in their unbreakable line, redemption accelerated, fierce and unyielding. If this chapter's glimpse into loyalty's quiet fire moved you, smash that like button. It helps these tales of honor and heart reach more souls in need of inspiration. The midday sun climbed higher over Willow Creek, turning the asphalt into a shimmering ribbon that snaked through fields of golden wheat, bending like weary sentinels. Samuel's convoy cut through the heat haze, engines thrumming in unison, a rhythmic heartbeat against the vast, indifferent sky. Connor rode just behind him now, the borrowed Harley humming beneath him, its vibrations syncing with the pulse in his temples. The wind tugged at his jacket, carrying the sharp tang of sun-baked earth and the faint, acrid bite of exhaust, a sensory anchor pulling him from the whirlwind of the morning. Margaret trailed with Jax, her scarf fluttering like a flag of quiet defiance, while Lena scouted ahead, her bike slicing the air with purposeful grace. Back at the Rusty Spur by early afternoon, the diner had emptied to its midday lull. The air inside cooler but still heavy with the ghosts of yesterday's revelations. Samuel killed the engine first, the sudden silence amplifying the crunch of gravel under boots as the group dismounted. Connor swung his leg over, helmet tucked under his arm, his face flushed from the ride, not just from the heat, but from the tentative thrill of motion shared with this man who might be more than a stranger. The Polaroid burned in his pocket, a talisman against the doubts gnawing at him. What if the blood said no? What if it said yes and dragged him into a world of roads and risks he'd only glimpsed in faded stories? They claimed the corner booth again, the same scarred wood now feeling like familiar ground. Rita brought fresh coffees without a word, her eyes soft with the empathy of someone who'd overheard too many heartaches in her shifts. Samuel slid into the seat across from Connor, his leather vest creaking as he leaned forward, the faint scent of road dust clinging to him like an old friend. "That ride? First time on two wheels?" he asked, voice low, breaking the ice with the ease of shared miles. Connor nodded, tracing the rim of his mug with a finger, steam rising in lazy curls. "Yeah, felt free, like Mom described in her letters, the ones Gran read to me, wind pushing back, but you push harder." The admission slipped out, unguarded, pulling a ghost of a smile from Samuel. Margaret watched them, her hands folded, the lines of worry easing just a fraction as fragments of Elena bridged the gap. Before the moment could deepen, Jax approached from the counter, his phone in hand, expression taut as barbed wire. "Boss, word from the doc's office. Results are in. Early turnaround. Paternity confirmed. 99.9. The words landed soft but seismic, rippling through the booth like a stone in still water. Connor's breath caught, his eyes locking on Samuel's, the grey depths reflecting a mirror of his own shock. Elena's eyes, now proven kin. Samuel exhaled slowly, a weight lifting from his shoulders, visible in the subtle slump of relief. "It's real, then. You're mine, kid. Elena's gift, waiting all this time." He reached across, not for a handshake this time, but a gentle clasp on the forearm, leather meeting skin, a vow sealed in touch. Connor didn't pull away. Instead, he felt the warmth seep through, chasing the chill of years alone. Margaret's tears fell freely now, not of sorrow, but release, her nod a silent benediction. But the triumph was short-lived, shattered by the diner's bell clanging like an alarm. Harlan Tate strode in again, this time flanked by two burly figures in plain clothes. Local enforcers he'd greased, their postures screaming hired muscle rather than merit. The air thickened, the scent of Harlan's overpowering cologne cutting through the coffee like intrusion. "Well, well," he sneered, eyes gleaming with predatory calculation as he zeroed in on the booth. "Heard the news traveled fast. Confirmed, huh? Touching. But let's talk reality, Doyle boy. Social services is en route. Emergency evaluation. Can't have a kid bouncing between grannies and biker dens. Unstable, they call it." Connor's jaw set, anger flaring hot in his chest, but Samuel's hand steadied him under the table, a subtle anchor. The Iron Promise crew materialized from their seats, forming a loose cordon, Jax cracking his knuckles softly, Lena's gaze like sharpened steel. Outside, more bikes revved to life, a defensive perimeter tightening. Margaret rose, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "This is our family, Harlan. You've hounded us long enough, eyeing our land like a vulture, but blood and promises run deeper than your schemes." Harlan laughed, a hollow bark that echoed off the walls, but his eyes darted nervously to the crew. "Promises? Cute. I've got the ear of the county sheriff. Twists the rules on family welfare to protect assets. Sign over that creek plot, and I make the calls stop. Progress for Willow Creek, they say. Refuse, and the boy gets placed. Foster care away from influences. His gaze raked over Samuel, disdain dripping like venom, preying on the fragility of the moment to fracture what was just mending. The diner patrons shrank back, whispers turning to uneasy silence, the fluorescent hum overhead amplifying the standoff. Connor shoved to his feet, voice cracking with fury. "You don't own us. This is my dad, proven. Back off before you regret it." The words surprised even him, a claim born of the morning's ride, the confirmation's weight forging something unyielding inside. Samuel stood beside him, a tower of quiet resolve, his presence shielding without a single raised voice. Iron promise has stood against worse. Corrupt badges, land grabs that break souls. We've got records, witnesses, allies who know your game, Tate. Push this, and the sheriff hears about your contributions to the pot. It wasn't a threat, it was truth, laced with the moral clarity of their covenant. Lena stepped forward, phone already recording subtly, her network humming with counter-intel, exposing Harlan's web of favors and forgeries that had ruined families before. Harlan's facade cracked, sweat beading on his brow as the enforcers shifted uneasily, sensing the tide turn. The crew's unity was palpable, a family chosen in the crucible of roads and redemption, their iron emblem a rebuke to his greed. He backed toward the door, gesturing sharply to his shadows. "This ain't over, county'll sort it, legal channels." But his retreat was hasty, the bell jingling his defeat, leaving the diner to exhale collectively. In the aftermath, Samuel turned to Connor, pride flickering in his eyes. "You stood tall, son. That's the Reed in you, Elena's fire too." Margaret pulled them both into a brief embrace, the booth now a sanctuary amid the storm. Outside, the convoy idled, ready to escort them home, a rolling fortress against further shadows. The confirmation vial might be paper, but this, the stand, the shield, was the real bond, weaving Connor into the fabric of iron promise. As the sun arced toward evening, casting long shadows across the plains, Connor mounted his bike again, the engine's roar a declaration. Harlan's threats lingered like distant thunder, hinting at institutional snares yet to unfold, welfare audits, land disputes twisted into weapons. But with Samuel at his side, the road felt less like exile and more like homecoming. Loyalty's quiet power surged, redeeming lost oaths 1 mile at a time as the family chosen rolled forward into the gathering dusk, unbreakable against the encroaching night. The evening sun dipped low over Willow Creek, bleeding crimson across the horizon like a wound slowly sealing, casting elongated shadows from the rusty spur's weathered sign that swayed gently in the cooling breeze. The diner's lot hummed with the low purr of idling engines. Iron Promise's convoy, a steadfast phalanx against the encroaching twilight. Connor straddled his borrowed Harley, the leather seat still warm from the day's heat. Its familiar grip steadying the surge of emotions roiling inside him. The confirmation's weight settled deeper now, not just ink on a report, but a tether pulling him toward Samuel, who stood nearby adjusting his gloves, the faint scent of oiled chains and sun-faded leather wafting from him like an unspoken invitation. Margaret emerged from the diner, her apron traded for a simple shawl, eyes bright with a mix of exhaustion and resolve. "Home," she said simply, climbing onto the pillion behind Jack's, her hands clasping his vest as if anchoring to the unyielding. The group rolled out in tight formation, tires crunching over gravel, before smoothing onto the cracked county road that wound toward the Doyle homestead, a modest rancher on the creek's edge, its white clapboard peeling under years of prairie winds. Connor rode abreast with Samuel, the wind whispering through the fields, carrying the earthy perfume of wild sage and distant rain. For the first time, the open expanse felt less isolating, more like a canvas for paths yet to unfold. The house came into view as dusk deepened, its porch light flickering on like a beacon, porch swing creaking faintly in the breeze. They parked in a loose arc, engines cutting to silence that amplified the chorus of crickets rising from the creek bed. Inside, the air was thick with the aroma of simmering stew. Margaret's ritual comfort, potatoes and carrots bubbling on the stove, steam curling toward the ceiling fan's lazy spin. Connor led the way, flipping on the kitchen light, its warm glow chasing shadows from the worn oak table where family meals had once gathered Elena's laughter. Samuel hesitated at the threshold, his broad frame filling the doorway, then stepped in, boots thudding softly on the linoleum. "Smells like home," he murmured, eyes tracing the faded photos on the walls. Elena as a girl, arms around a younger Margaret, gaps where frames once held dreams unfulfilled. Jax and Lena hung back in the living room, scanning windows with habitual caution, while the rest of the core crew patrolled the perimeter, their silhouettes dark against the gloaming. They gathered around the table, bowls steaming, spoons clinking against ceramic in the quiet rhythm of shared sustenance. Connor sat across from Samuel, the stew's savoury warmth grounding him as words flowed easier now. "Mum's letters. She wrote about riding with you once, just the two of you, chasing fireflies on some back road at midnight. Said it felt like freedom wrapped in promise." His voice carried a tentative bridge, probing the man before him for echoes of the father he'd imagined. Samuel's spoon paused mid-air, grey eyes distant for a beat, then softening. That was our spot. Outside Tulsa, under a sky thick with stars. She hummed that old tune, Wanderer's Oath, while I fixed a flat. Swore we'd build something real away from the grind. The hall was meant to seal it. Funds for this very land. Keep it in Doyle hands. He glanced at Margaret, who nodded, tears glistening but held back. Failed her there, but not by intent. The crash. Docs pulled metal from my leg, said I was lucky to walk, woke thinking I'd lost everything, rode blind to bury it. The confession hung, raw and unadorned, the clock on the wall ticking like a metronome to their mending. Lena leaned in from the doorway, her voice a low thread. "We've all got scars like that. Mine from a convoy gone wrong, lost my brother to a rigged bridge overseas. Iron Promise pulled me from the dark. Now we pull for each other." Her words wove the club's ethos into the room, a reminder that bloodlines paled against bonds hammered in adversity. Outside, the night fully claimed the sky, stars pricking through like iron nails in black velvet. But peace fractured with the crunch of tires on the gravel drive, headlights slicing the dark, sweeping across the windows like accusatory beams. Jax was at the door first, peering through the curtain. County cruiser. And that sedan from before. Harlan's play brought the law to lean. Samuel rose, calm authority in his movements, waving Connor back as he stepped onto the porch. The air chilled, carrying the metallic tang of officialdom, two deputies disembarking, badges glinting under the floodlight, flanked by Harlan's smirking form emerging from the passenger side. "Evening, Reed," the lead deputy drawled, hand resting on his belt, voice laced with scripted concern. "Got a call about a minor in distress, unverified parentage, unstable environment. Need to take the boy for evaluation. Standard procedure under the Family Integrity Code." Harlan hovered, arms crossed, his cologne a cloying intrusion on the night air. "Told you it wasn't over. Social workers en route, foster placement to protect him from biker influences. Sign the deed, Margaret, and this all vanishes. Creek frontage for my development, kid gets a clean slate." Connor pushed past Samuel to the porch rail, heart pounding like the engines they'd silenced, fists clenched against the wood's splintered edge. "This is my home, my family, you can't just—" But Samuel's hand on his shoulder steadied him, a silent vow of containment. The deputies advanced, one pulling a clipboard, the other eyeing the crew's bikes like threats. Iron Promise materialized from the shadows, Jax at the gate. Lena with her phone live streaming to their network, voices low but firm. "We've got the results official," Samuel stated, voice gravel steady, holding up a printed copy from the doc. Paternity confirmed. No distress, no instability. This is harassment. Deputy, log it or our allies will. Tension coiled, the creaks murmur a tense underscore, moonlight glinting off the deputy's holsters. Harlan shifted, unease cracking his poise as Lena's contact buzzed back. A district attorney, once a promise rider, already filing for an injunction against the overreach. "You're out of line, Tate," the woman said coolly. "Records show your history. Pressuring estates, falsifying welfare claims. This ends tonight." The lead deputy faltered, glancing at his partner, the clipboard lowering. Harlan's face twisted, a snarl escaping. "You think a gang of road rats scares me? The sheriff—" But Jax cut in, voice even. "Sheriff's golfing with our judge friend tomorrow. Your contributions? There'll be headlines by dawn." The standoff stretched, seconds heavy as lead, until the deputy holstered his radio with a sigh. "Stand down. We'll verify in the morning. Clean channels." Harlan sputtered protests as they retreated to their vehicles, taillights fading into the night, leaving echoes of tires on dirt. Back inside, the kitchen light felt warmer. Stew bowls refilled as adrenaline ebbed. Connor sank into his chair, the weight of the stand forging something solid within. "They almost— But you didn't back down." Samuel met his gaze, pride unspoken but palpable. "We don't. Promises aren't paper. They're the stand you take when the dark presses in." Margaret poured tea, her hands steady now, the room a bastion of reclaimed ground. Outside, the crew maintained watch, their engines a distant rumble, guardians against the receding threat. Harlan's web frayed, but threads lingered, deeper corruptions in county ledgers, alliances that could yet ensnare. Yet in that fragile hearth, Connor felt the pull of chosen kin, redemption's quiet forge, tempering doubt into resolve. The night deepened, stars bearing witness to oaths unbroken, as the family, blood and bond, braced for the dawn's inevitable tests, their unity a light piercing the moral gloom. The first rays of dawn filtered through the Doyle kitchen curtains like tentative fingers, gilding the steam rising from fresh-brewed coffee and casting a soft glow on the oak table, scarred by years of shared meals. The air carried the comforting aroma of toasted bread and faint wood smoke from the creekside hearth, mingling with the lingering trace of last night's stew, a quiet testament to endurance. Connor stirred sugar into his mug, the spoon clinking softly. His eyes heavy but clear, the night's confrontation etching a new resolve into his features. Samuel sat across from him, map of the county spread between them, marked with notes from Lena's network, Harlan's tangled dealings, from bribed officials to coerced sales, all threads in a web of quiet predation. Margaret moved about the stove, her shawl draped over shoulders that bore the weight of vigilance, pouring eggs into a skillet with a sizzle that filled the room. "Slept like stones after that ruckus," she said, voice warm but edged with caution. "But morning brings its own reckonings." Jax and Lena had crashed on the living room couch and spare cots, their presence a subtle shield, while the rest of Iron Promise patrolled the perimeter at first light, engines humming like watchful hounds. Samuel folded the map, his gloved hands deliberate, the leather creaking faintly. Harlan won't slink away quiet. His type thrives on shadows, pushing welfare audits to freeze the land, whispering to the sheriff about biker threats to paint us as the villains. But we've got the high ground now, the doc's report, recordings from last night, and allies who owe us oaths. His grey eyes met Connor's, holding the steady promise of a father stepping into the role fate had delayed. The boy nodded, the motion small but firm, the Polaroid now pinned to his jacket like a badge. The ride yesterday, the stand on the porch, these had forged something unbreakable, a bridge from ghost to guardian. Before breakfast could settle, tires crunched on the gravel drive, not the aggressive growl of a cruiser, but the measured roll of an unmarked van. Lena was at the window first, her silhouette tense. "Our contact, the judge, with backup. Time to cut the snake's head." Samuel rose, waving the group to follow as they stepped onto the porch. The morning chill nipping at exposed skin, dew glistening on the railings like fragile jewels. The van disgorged 3 figures. The retired judge, Elias Crow, silver-haired and sharp-eyed from his days riding with promise, a state investigator with a briefcase of sealed files, and a notary bearing witness. Harlan's sedan trailed at a distance, the man himself visible in the passenger seat, him face-paling as he recognized the lineup. Crow approached with a nod to Samuel, his voice gravelly from courtroom battles. "Reed, got your call. Harlan Tate's empire crumbles today. Audits on his contributions, witnesses from past grabs. The family integrity code he twisted. We're straightening it, exposing how he preyed on the vulnerable, turning grief into gain." Harlan spilled out, suit rumpled, flanked by a nervous deputy who'd switched sides overnight. "This is interference, county jurisdiction." But the investigator cut him off, flashing documents that caught the dawn light. "Your jurisdiction ends here, Tate. Forged welfare claims, land deeds under duress. We've got paper trails leading to the sheriff's desk. The Doyle property stays yours, Margaret, free and clear. No more shadows." Connor watched from the porch steps, heart thumping in rhythm with the creek's distant flow, the air thick with the scent of pine and vindication. Harlan's bluster deflated, his eyes darting like a cornered fox as Crow laid out the terms: resignation from local boards, restitution to affected families, and a quiet exit from Willow Creek. No cuffs, no spectacle, just the inexorable grind of moral justice. Iron Promise's quiet network unraveling the corruption without a single raised fist. The opportunist signed with trembling hands, the notary's stamp a final seal, his sedan peeling away in defeat, dust clouding the horizon like a fading curse. Back inside, the kitchen buzzed with subdued triumph. Plates of eggs and toast passed around as the group exhaled. Margaret clasped Samuel's hand across the table, her blue eyes shining. "You kept your word, Sam. After all the miles, you came back. For her, for him." The words carried the weight of Elena's unspoken vow, a circle closing under the morning sun, streaming through the windows. Samuel turned to Connor, the boy's plate half-eaten. Falk paused. "This land, this home, it's yours to hold, son. But the road, it's in your blood too. Iron Promise isn't a cage, it's a choice. Ride with us when you're ready. Learn the oaths that bind us." Connor felt the pull, the duality of roots and roam, Elena's fire kindling in his chest. "I want both," he said, voice steady. "Gran here, you out there. Family doesn't split, it stretches." The crew murmured approval, Jax clapping Connor's shoulder with a grin, Lena sketching a quick emblem on a napkin. The iron fist, now with a new link for the boy. Outside, engines revved softly as the convoy prepared to roll, not in escape but escort, ensuring the Doyle line held firm against any lingering echoes. Samuel led Connor to the porch, handing him the keys to the borrowed Harley. "First solo run, to the creek. Show me what Elena passed on." Connor mounted up, the engine roaring to life under his grip, wind rising as he accelerated down the path, Samuel flanking him on his own bike. The plains unfolded, golden under the climbing sun, the scent of freedom sharp and alive. Margaret watched from the door, shawl fluttering, her wave a blessing on the horizon. Harlan's threat dissolved like mist, justice's quiet poetry prevailing over greed's clamour. In the miles that followed, Connor glanced back, the Doyle house shrinking, but not fading, a anchor amid the vastness. Samuel's voice carried over the wind, gravelly and true. "Promises survive the storms, kid. We just keep riding." The road curved ahead, twists of ethical trials yielding to the straight path of redemption, where chosen family forged legacies in silence and steel. Connor accelerated, the roar a symphony of belonging, honor's legacy thundering into the light. If you've journeyed with us through this tale of rediscovered bonds and unyielding honor, thank you from the depths of the northern winds. Subscribe and join the Iron Promise family. Your support fuels more stories of redemption on the road.